The James Show Podcast.
Your weekend starts in 3 hours, but until then, I'm going to get you all caught up on the news. We're going to have a lot of fun today, actually. You're going to get some giggles out of today's show, but we're going to start with some serious stuff. The Iran-Israel back and forth continues. Now, I would say they keep saying on it's escalating on Fox News, and then I turn over to MSNBC. They say it's escalating. And then I look at the numbers, and it's not really escalating. It kind of seems to be on a nice little downward trend. Now, last night was a bad night in the fact that one of the missiles from Iran actually made it to its target, hit an apartment building, 200 injured. That's terrible. But it's a little more complex than that, because we're getting a new layer that's being added into the discussion here in the last 24 hours or so. And that seems to be some flights going from China to Iran and back. What is this? If you look at the airspace maps over Iran right now, all the flights in the world, commercial flights and whatnot, cargo flights, who knows, are being diverted around Iran. It's like, it looks like a big fart cloud, basically. There will be planes that are going right for it, and then they'll just bow around it when they get to the Iranian airspace and rejoin whatever trajectory they were previously on. And then you see a couple of planes going straight through. It's like, excuse me, Mr. Pilot, Leroy, did you forget to turn? Did you zig when you should have zagged? No. These are cargo flights from China to Iran. That's a big uh-oh. Let's talk about speculation on this uh-oh. What could be on those planes? So best case scenario for us, hey, they just had some Amazon orders that they were expecting, and that's all it is. It's just, I don't know, maybe the housewives of Tehran got some new outfits off Temu. That's best case scenario. But that seems a little too easy, doesn't it? Would you really be running into a war zone just for some crop tops and maybe some little flare-bottom pants from Temu? Doubt it. Is it humanitarian aid? Iran is in a tough spot as far as their blockade goes. They have big sanctions going. They have their international trade efforts really strangled. And so are they getting enough food in? Are they getting enough medical supplies in? Are they getting enough things to keep the people of Iran happy during this tough time? Is China helping with that? And then let's keep going down the dark, doomy, speculative area. Are they sending them weapons? Are they sending them missiles? Are they sending them replenishing their air defense capabilities? Are they sneaking them nuclear material? Are they sneaking them a nuclear weapon? So the speculation can get real dark real quick on these flights. But that seems to be a huge concern. China does not have our best interests at heart. China does probably like the fact that Iran is a thorn in our side. And in much the same way, Ukraine and Russia has been useful from an American perspective as to weaken Putin. China propping up Iran gives them a chance through a proxy to exhaust some of our resources, our military capabilities, to show our hands on what we can and can't do with drones. So China also gets a lot of really cheap oil from Iran. Now, Iran they're not really supposed to be selling to anybody, but they do sell, and they claim to about 17 countries. 17 countries on the planet are willing to buy oil from Iran. Biggest purchaser of Iranian oil, China. And because Iran is cut off from the international banking system, they're cut off really from the international world markets. They don't have the same supply and demand pressures and regime that we live under, and OPEC even lives under. So they have to sell their oil at a super steep discount. Now, if you're China, Iran is not your number one supplier of oil. That would be Russia. Nobody imports more oil in the world than China on a daily basis. Their number one customer, Russia, or client, I should say. They're the customer. But the incentives is reversed from the Iranian point of view, and China probably holds that oil in higher regard because they get it so much cheaper than they get it from everywhere else. And so you can kind of see a couple of overlaps here. We have strangled Putin, kicked him out of the international banking system, sanctioned the hell out of him, tried to cut off some of his oil. We cut off the Nord Stream pipeline and whatnot. What does he do? Turns around and sells to China. We try and do that to Iran. That doesn't matter. They turn around and sell to China. China's a big problem. China is the reason, one of the reasons why sanctions aren't as painful as they otherwise would be if China wasn't such a butthead and antagonist to our national self-interest. Flights from China to Iran, cargo flights. What could that mean? Well, let's ask my next guest. He's from the Gatestone Institute and probably one of the best-known China hawks in America, Gordon Chang, back on the James Show. Welcome back, Mr. Chang.
Thank you so much, James.
All right, let me ask you a question all of us wish we knew. What is on those flights? What do you think?
We really don't know. And there's a lot of mystery regarding these flights in general. We have seen 3 cargo planes chartered by China heading towards Iranian airspace turn off their transponders. Now, most people have assumed that those planes have actually ended up in Iran, probably carrying weapons. Now, there is a news site called France 24, which says those planes never entered Iranian airspace.
Sure.
But there's one thing we know, James, and that is China has supplied substantial quantities of weapons to Iran. And even more important, it supplied critical components for Iran's own weapons, such as microchips. So the Chinese are up to no good, regardless of these planes.
Well, Gordon Chang, China gets a lot of really cheap oil from Iran, so they probably have a good incentive to keep the status quo.
Yeah, well, they certainly have a good incentive to keep the Iranian regime fighting. And matter of fact, we have seen since the October 7th war, China's gone almost all in on Iran. It's buying elevated commodities, elevated quantities of oil. China takes more than 90% of Iran's exports of oil. But it's more than that. It's propaganda and diplomatic support. It's opening up its financial system to Iran. I believe it is providing targeting data to Iran, though we don't know that in open source yet. And, of course, these weapons, the weapons flows to Iran and to Iran's main proxy groups, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthi militia, all have large quantities of China's weapons.
So this seems to be dominoes that keep falling. We're talking with Gordon Chang. Gordon G. Chang on Twitter is a great follow. So we don't like the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas. They're all backed up by Iran. So we start dealing with Iran. Well, they're backed up by China. At what point do we have to deal with China?
Well, we should be dealing with China now, because it's China. If we prevented these exports of sanctioned oil, Iran wouldn't have money. If Iran didn't have money, it wouldn't be able to wage wars against Israel and whoever else they've got on their agenda. Plus, also the same thing is true for Russia and Ukraine. China has been taking elevated levels of Russian oil and gas.
Yeah, I looked it up.
Has been financing the war.
Sorry about that. I looked it up before the show. China is Russia's #1 customer.
Yes.
Yeah, so they're kind of the same thing. We would like for Russia to stop meddling in Ukraine. So we put on all these sanctions, targeting their oil. But if China's not going to honor the sanctions, that really doesn't do a whole lot. So they've really got the financial backing for both of these war fronts.
Yes, and China with its financing is also fueling insurgencies in North Africa that look like wars. So China is setting the world on fire. And we can actually do a lot if we start vigorously enforcing our sanctions and making them more comprehensive. And it's not just sanctions on Iran or Russia. It's sanctions on China, secondary sanctions, which are absolutely necessary. Cut off the flow of money, we stop wars.
Well, that seems like cutting the snake's head off there is if you can get China to stop being a bad actor, because then the sanctions would work and Putin would either have to come to the table or crumble. The Ayatollahs would either have to come to the table or crumble. That would probably diminish Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis to about nothing. So really, it seems the biggest source of our problems worldwide isn't Iran or Russia, it's China.
Oh, absolutely. One could even say, with just a little bit of exaggeration, we don't have an Iran problem. We got a China problem. Because China has been behind all of these disturbances and wars and insurgencies. And really what it is doing is what Mao Zedong did in the early years of the People's Republic. And that is use chaos to destabilize the world. Now, Mao thought by doing that, that would lead to worldwide Chinese rule. I believe Xi Jinping actually has adopted that tactic from Mao's playbook of trying to establish worldwide Chinese rule, not control, not domination, not the exertion of hegemony, but direct rule.
Well, let me hear your best guess. I know we don't know what is on those flights, but do you think it's like something military, like ammunitions and drones? Do you think it's more centrifuges or uranium? Do you think it's just humanitarian aid and food? I mean, if you had to guess, where would you put your chips?
Well, I wouldn't be drones because Iran is one of the world's largest manufacturer of drones, just behind China. I would guess it would be short-range ballistic missiles because those do real damage to Israel. So that would be the most probable cargo of these planes.
What's the deal with Luxembourg here? These freighters said they had a final destination of Luxembourg when they turned off their transponders, and then they never reappeared over European skies. Is Luxembourg just a scapegoat for this, or are they just... I don't know what their involvement is.
Yeah, I think that it's because some of these planes might be actually registered in Luxembourg. These are not Chinese planes, by the way. These are China chartered planes, and so you bring in places like Luxembourg, which are places where people register aircraft.
Gordon Chang, Gatestone Institute, on the James Show with us. Does Iran see itself as a proxy of China? Because I think the Chinese see Iran as a proxy, but the Iranians think, well, we're just getting some help from our neighbor. Yeah,
no, you're absolutely right about that. Iran doesn't see itself as a proxy of anyone. It sees itself as leading the world to a global caliphate. And, the Chinese don't buy into that notion. But the Chinese do believe that Iran is useful for destabilizing the Middle East. So it's attacking and assaulting Israel. And so the Chinese view the Iranians as proxies, although the Iranians don't view themselves that way.
All right. Well, thanks for some of the inside scoop there. Where do we find your work online? I'm a big fan of your Twitter, Gordon G. Chang, but what else you got going on?
Yeah, I archive all my articles for free on my website, which is www.gordonchang.com.
Thank you very much. Gordon Chang, once again on the James Show, clearing up, or trying to clear up what's going on with these mystery flights from China to Iran. But so in the Iran scenario, the debate about the war has a terrible habit of devolving into ad hominem attacks. And the greatest example, we played this first for you yesterday on the show, was Whoopi Goldberg and Sonny Holliston from The View actually arguing with one of their co-hosts, Alyssa Farah, saying being black in America is just as oppressive as being in Iran. Absolutely ludicrous statement. But in case you haven't heard it yet, let me go ahead and catch up the people who missed it yesterday. And then we're just going to blow this out of the water because this is really clouding a lot of people's judgment on what's going on over there, on what we should do, on what we have a right to do, on what Israel has a right to do. And this moral relativism is at the root of the problem. So let's review. This is Whoopi and Sonny from The View arguing with their co-host Alyssa Farah 2 days ago on The View.
And that's why I am saying that it is the same. Murdering someone for their difference is not good, whoever does it. It's not good. So that's why I said you weren't saying what I heard was not what you meant.
I think it's very different to live in the United States in 2025 than it is to live in Iran.
Not if you're black.
Not for everybody.
Wow.
Not if you're black.
Guys, don't go to Tehran. Do not anyone at this table should go to Tehran.
Let me tell you about being in this country. This is the greatest country in the world. But, yeah, I know that.
Gosh, you just
and we all know that.
Immediately.
But every day, we are worried. Do we have to be worried about our kids? Are our kids going to get shot because they're running through somebody's neighborhood? They are not big deals, and I don't mean to say they're not big deals to you, because that's not women, what I meant.
And they are not doing well there either. They are not doing well in Iran. They are not educated. They cannot have property. They cannot leave States.
I'm talking about here.
Nobody wants to diminish the very real problems we have in this country. That is no one's intent.
Good.
But I think it's important we remember there are places much darker than this country and people who deserve rights.
Not everybody feels that way. Not everybody feels that way. Listen, I'm sorry. When you think about the fact that we got the vote in 1965.
Okay, they don't have free and fair elections in Iran. It's not even the same universe. They can't go out of their house. The women,
you know what? There's no way I can make you understand.
Let me try something. It's like try to reverse roles with a black person in this country, let's say, because I think that's what you're talking about.
Yes.
Just try to understand from their point of view. From that point of view, this country does not do them well. Does not go for them.
I completely acknowledge that.
And we shouldn't compare atrocities.
If you're talking about Iran, of course, is doing worse things. But relatively speaking, it feels bad.
Okay, but I think you know that Iran is significantly worse.
Yeah, it feels bad on this side. So here's the great. I did a rundown on the difference in your full complement of human rights in America versus Iran. But Fox News had a guest on. Now, she was born in Iran. They had to flee in the 1979 revolution. Sounds like she was educated in Britain or something, because she has a little bit of an English accent, but she looked quite Americanized. Her name's Alicia Laban. I'm sorry, I'm bad with Farsi names. But she did a great just tear down. And it's a mindset that deserves to be torn down, this equivalency.
And because, the world has been saturated with so much disinformation, this disinformation that was heightened particularly after October 7th, where there was this narrative that, these terrorists are just freedom fighters and they're not that bad. It normalized this idea that actually these regimes in other parts of the world are not that bad, and maybe they're not even that different to the United States. Then you have people who are living in the lap of luxury saying things like living in the United States is exactly the same as living in Iran. Well, it's not anything like living in Iran, because Iran, they are hanging people from cranes statistically once every 6 hours. Just 2 weeks ago, they amputated 2 people's arms because they were accused of theft. Did they have due process? Did they have fair trials? No, that does not exist under the Islamic regime in Iran. When protesters came out in the streets to protest against this regime, which is our unequivocal right under the Constitution in the United States, did they get met with the same treatment? No, they were shot to death and they had their eyes shot out as punishment. So my response is, how dare anybody compare the life that they're fortunate enough to live in the United States to what Iranian people are going through now and have been going through for the past 46 years.
Yeah, I'll admit, she did that better than I did yesterday. But I want you to dig into what Whoopi and Sonny are saying there, because a lot of your neighbors believe this. A lot of you are married to people that think like this. A lot of you have daughters and kids and neighbors and sister-in-law and maybe your mom or your aunt. And, Evan Said explains this mindset so good in his books, but I'll try and paraphrase what he would say, because when Whoopi and Sonny say being black in America is just as oppressive as being in Iran right now, they're not talking about America as a whole. They don't see themselves as the bad guy. They don't see themselves as the oppressor. They don't see Team Blue as the oppressors. They see them as the ones on the right side. They're only talking about Team Red here. They're talking about you. They think you are like Iran. And in some ways, if you stay on the real shallow end of the baby pool, you can maybe pull off that level of self-delusion. Because, hey, look, they're really into religion. Team Red in the hinterlands and flyover country, they're overly religious. And sure, Iran likes to oppress women, but those MAGA people, they sure do love to oppress women. So, as long as you take on these silly stereotypes that really have no foundation in the real world, and you just carry through the narrative that they keep being fed, you can easily see why someone would say, oh, yeah, the Team Red just as bad as Iran. Now, that's not true. I know it's not true. You know it's not true. But what we're trying to explain here is, how can Whoopi Goldberg and Sonny Hostin and your sister-in-law and maybe your daughter, how can they say such silly, obviously not true things? Well, number one, they have a cognitive dissonance going on in their head that they just can't fill. And they just can't resolve it without silly little claims like this. Maybe they'll grow out of it. Maybe they won't. Whoopi Goldberg, not going to grow out of it. Your college-age daughter might grow out of it, but not if she keeps listening to this stuff. That's for damn sure. Make her listen to the James Show. That might help a little bit. But don't make any mistakes. When they say America is just as oppressive as Iran, they're talking about you. You are just as bad as the Ayatollahs. Now act accordingly. Let's talk about your money for a second. because you're not getting the straight skinny over here. If you look at the S&P 500, the broadest of the major indices, not only have your stocks recovered where they were before the tariff dip happened, they're actually 5% above. The S&P 500 is 5% higher than where it closed on April 1st, the day before Liberation Day, when you saw the first big tumble. And it's almost to your all-time record high. Where's the reporting on that? You got reporting all day, every day during the decline, and now that it's recovered and blown past it, nothing. Well, that just proves you cannot trust much of the media when it comes to accurate or fair reporting, when it comes to things that affect your money. You know, this shouldn't even be political, but somehow even talking about finances is. My next guest can help clear up some of the fog here. Spencer McGowan's back on from Net Worth Radio, which you can hear on the weekends here on WBAP. Welcome back, Spencer McGowan. I was just making the case that the economy, especially the stock markets, deserve a lot more credit on how well they've recovered.
Yeah, it was the depths of despair that date you mentioned, first part of April. And the Dow was 36,600 after hitting 45,000. And we're sitting right at 42,000 before the Israeli strikes in Iran. The Dow was about 43,000. S&P was only 2% from an all-time high.
So let's break down some of this, because I had a lot of people who were emailing me, and most of them were I feel like it was politically motivated. In that first kind of downturn that we had in February, people were saying, this is a bigger deal. You need to be talking about this because people's retirement accounts are destroyed. And, you know, of all the people that called or sent an email or a Facebook message, none of them have written me another message saying, oh, well, it's all recovered now. My bad. I guess I was being hyperbolic and sensational for nothing.
No, you're exactly right. And the New York Times, Paul Krugman, I've got some clients on the left, and they'll email me, Paul Krugman's dire predictions. And the tariffs really gave a lot of ammunition, because I was expecting disruption, which we didn't get. The GDP right now, Atlanta Fed is 3.4%. That's really healthy. And inflation went to a 4-year low. And I was surprised at how good that was, right? So you're exactly right that this was a big head fake, and a lot of it was driven by financial media that was not happy about the election outcome.
Well, here's what I find so frustrating is all these people that were hyperbolic. Your retirement's going to be destroyed. Your IRA is just getting decimated, and people are being screwed over by these terrible policies. They're still going to be in business after this. And in fact, next year when they get all these predictions wrong, they're still going to keep their job. And I find it frustrating that we don't get rewarded for being right, and these other people don't face any consequences for being not just wrong, like so 180 degrees wrong.
It's a tough life out there, like Whoopi Goldberg's.
Yeah, she is so oppressed. Spencer McGowan, don't get me started on her. We just did her in the last segment.
I was coming into my home office, and I was listening, and just that was a great segment. Well done.
Well, she's talking about how oppressed she is being black in America while she's sitting on a throne of $50 million net worth. Spencer, please oppress me like that.
And she's getting a good salary on top of that.
Well, you know what? You kind of surprised me there. I had not heard the Atlanta Fed's. Is this their prediction for the second quarter is above 3%?
There's only 10 days left in the quarter, bud, and 3.4%. So they gather the data every week, the Atlanta Fed. And, you've got, I think there's some political motivation at the Fed too. But anyway, Atlanta Fed, this is not political. They just gather the data, say economic activity annualized is about 3.4%, growing at 3.4%. The 20-year average is only 2.1. That's a wow.
Yeah, so we have a better than average GDP growth. By the way, we're talking with Spencer McGowan, Net Worth Radio, heard on the weekends here on WBAP. But what this also means, if we do have anything that's a positive number, much less a 3.4%, is all this talk about recession is gone. That was all wrong, too, for all the people that were saying, oh, we're in a recession right now, or he's driving us into recession, or these tariffs are going to cause a recession, or the big, beautiful bill, or the Israelis and Iranian moves, or whatever. People are predicting recession. These people also all owe us an apology.
At least temporarily. When the tariffs, you've got tariffs that are going to take effect if the negotiations aren't successful. And that could cause, bigger disruption. But at this point, inflation did not go up. That's exactly what happened in 2018. That round of tariffs, the Dow would be down 1,000 points a day. I'd get calls to broadcast about it because it was tariffs and everybody said global recession, and GDP was just fine. 2018, 2019, inflation went from 2.9 when the tariffs started June of 18. Well, 6 months later, it was down to 1.5. Now, I would not intuitively, that doesn't make sense. And you could still have tariff disruption. But the 2018 playbook appears to be coming true. More recently, the 2022 playbook after the invasion by Russia of Ukraine, there's some important lessons in 2022 when we had that oil spike.
All right, Spencer McGowan, Net Worth Radio. What's coming up on the show this weekend?
Well, I did the 22 analysis, and this was really interesting, okay? So if you take S&P 500, blue chip stocks, represents a lot of the 401k balances. Russia invades Ukraine, and S&P was down 20% by June after the February invasion. The energy index, XLE is the symbol of the S&P 500, not a recommendation, but it was up 50% at the point the S&P was down 20, and it finished the year up about 50%. So that was a pretty good playbook for what happened in 22, and it gives some good guidance, and I'm going to walk through that in more detail.
That sounds interesting. Well, this is Spencer McGowan. You can hear him on Net Worth Radio here on WBAP on the weekends. What time are you on?
We are WBAP 4 o'clock Saturday afternoon.
Thank you very much. Spencer McGowan, Net Worth Radio again.
The James Show Podcast.